Captain Frank Kress, representing the Governor-General, the Honourable Malcolm Turnbull, Prime Minister of Australia, Ms. Lucy Turnbull, members and senators, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, Reverend clergy, and the Cohen family. Friends all, we're here this morning remembering Barry Cohen's life and legacy. A great Australian who contributed so much and in so many areas to Australia in his unique and eloquent way. My last conversation with Barry, he reflected in depth upon his life. He posited that although he was not the most observant Jew, as a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, he had an unshakable connection and was immensely proud to heroically fight against anti-Semitism wherever he saw it. He had the fortitude to call out Holocaust denial and anti-Zionism for what it is, the dangerous new faces of anti-Semitism. Barry never took his freedom and life for granted. On this first sitting day of Parliament for the new year, with this great display of support from all sides of the political divide, I pray, and Barry would have surely wanted all the political parties of Australia to recommit to supporting and encouraging the rights of all peace-loving Australians to practice their beliefs, free from any hindrance or persecution. Before I go on, to commence the formal proceedings for this memorial service, I invite for the welcome to country Auntie Jeanette Phillips, the local Ngunnawal elder.
Yumalandi, Dura Nungana, Dura Nungwa, Yumalandi. These are the words of my grandfather, mother. Tonight say I welcome you to the land of my ancestors. Country, it shows that we have survived. And this is one of the things that I love Barry for. He totally understood us, because there were times when we were banging and kicking at the doors. And he understood. He understood what had gone before. Him and I fought like cats and dogs. Apologise, right? I can remember once after the Timor incident, I was screaming at him, absolutely yelling. And then coming member of Maroubra, Mr. Carr, quiet down, he said. I said no. And I can remember Barry standing there and saying there's nothing we could do. And Mr. Carr dragging me off to the tea room to give me a cup of tea. But I love the idea that I was the bane of his existence, because it means people like me could prod him. '72 and 74, and I told Mrs. Ray Cohen that I have the most beautiful picture of her holding my beloved daughter, who's now 44 in April. Don't the years go. He was a good man. Warts and all, and don't we have them? He did his best. And I think when he looks back behind him and sees his footprints, I know that he will be proud of the person, Rabbi said. May not have been the most perfect Jew, but he was a good person. He had a big heart. And I love the idea that I always tell what perfume I had on. Most men can't. But he would say, "Are you wearing this today?" The idea that he's not here anymore, his spirit is. The physical, I always believe that you dress the best for memorials and funerals because this is the last time the human envelope that housed that amazing spirit. I'll miss you, Barry. I dropped out of politics. I thought it was too useless after a while. Dwelled under the illusion to be a state member, got sick of that. And remote area and domestic violence, and absolutely, when I come home I was really happy to do so. The heat up there is shocking. First and foremost, I'd like to apologise to our Prime Minister for calling him the wrong name. Have you recovered? Good. It was meant. I could have died on the spot. But hey, you know. Barry did, if there's a sign, Barry did the best he could with what he had. And that really is what matters. And I thank Great Spirit for his life. And his family, you are all the more stronger and beautiful for being part of who he was. And the thing that I remember is you saying about Thompson, the actor, how beautiful he was. I met him and he was. So I wish you all the very, very best in the coming generations that will be his legacy. Thank you all. Yumalandi, welcome. Yumalandi, welcome. Yumalandi, welcome, and thank you.
That was truly beautiful. I've heard lots of welcome to countries, and that by far was the most touching and personal one. Thank you, Auntie Jeanette. I'd now like to ask everyone to please rise for the singing of the Australian National Anthem. I'm truly proud as a fifth-generation Australian rabbi to be singing the Australian national anthem, together with many members of the Jewish and other faith communities, just generally Australian community, who are all indebted, and I stand deeply indebted to all that Barry did in continuing to preserving and building on the tolerant society that we all continue to enjoy as Australians. I now call upon our illustrious Prime Minister, the Honourable Malcolm Turnbull.
Barry Cohen was a born performer, made for show business. He loved a stage, and for 21 glorious years, our Parliament was the venue. It was here in Canberra, always perfectly well dressed, a natural dandy, well-cut suits, always looking the very best. He courted laughter in all its forms. He did so with an artful and seemingly endless deployment of anecdotes, which he sharpened and improved over time with his inimitable wit. He used humour to connect with people. The Australians, whose interests he worked tirelessly to advocate, and of course his fellow parliamentarians. He also used it to stay humble. Actually very good advice for all of us politicians. I know our former Prime Minister Bob Hawke would agree. It's always important not to take yourself too seriously, and Barry certainly never did that. When his ministerial career ended in 1987, there was a lot of speculation about him becoming the Speaker. He responded to this chatter in a column for the Bulletin and recounted his valiant attempt as a freshman MP to read the standing orders. At least he started reading them, Mr. Speaker. You'd no doubt appreciate that. Barry said he made it all the way to page 2. And he ended his column with this typical line of self-deprecation. The Hawke government has its problems, but it's not yet so desperate that it should risk the destruction of the Westminster system by appointing me Speaker. Part of Barry's appeal stemmed from his ability to blend frivolity with the deepest and most heartfelt sincerity. Behind the laughter was a man who felt acutely and cared profoundly, as Auntie Jeanette has reminded us. He once revealed that John Steinbeck's haunting Grapes of Wrath prompted his political career, and his advocacy for others was the perfect illustration of one of the novel's central themes, that we're at our best when we work together rather than toiling alone to overcome hardship. He abhorred discrimination in all of its forms, something he had experienced as a young Jewish man in the 1940s, and he possessed a fierce desire to combat it. In his maiden speech to Parliament in 1970, Barry spoke against prejudice based on class, religion or race, and he spoke loudly, as again Auntie Jeanette reminded us, for our first Australians. He also believed that Australia's parliamentarians should never stop learning and should obtain every skill possible. This was hardly surprising for a man who before politics enjoyed stints as a first-class golfer, postman, clerk and businessman. But for Barry, no vocation was more enthralling or more rewarding than writing, and he continued to write even after Alzheimer's cast its long shadow. His writing opened the door on what had previously been the very private pain of those who live with Alzheimer's. He fought for greater awareness of dementia, and he often did it, again, with his trademark humour. When former Prime Minister John Howard asked Barry how he found life in a nursing home, his response was quick. "Question time," he yelled to a roar of laughter from John. Australia has been richer for his presence, and we mourn his loss. To his beloved wife, Ray, and his family, I offer the nation's deep and sincere thanks and appreciation for a life of public service well served. Thank you.
Fantastic tribute. Thank you, Prime Minister. I have to say as well, you look great with the yarmulke, I always tell you. Now gives me a great honour as well to call upon our illustrious Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Bill Shorten.
The great Fred Daly's warning to a young Barry Cohen is part of Labor folklore. Fred said to Barry, "Cut out the comedy. You're a very funny young man, but it won't help you." Just how lucky are we that Barry ignored that advice? How lucky are we that alongside his passion for public service, his love of family, his determination to eliminate discrimination, and his belief in the Labor Party as an engine for progress and fairness, Barry also had an enduring faith in the restorative power of laughter. How lucky are we to have known and loved a man who found so much joy and humour in life and in politics. How lucky are we that this marvellous raconteur, this irrepressible force of fun, chronicled so many moments of wit, slapstick and farce in the columns for The Australian and The Bulletin and a prodigious number of books. Barry Cohen did not try and write ponderous tomes which magnify every decision through that lens of posterity. He didn't use his words to settle scores or rewrite history. Instead, his love was for the humour which makes politics human. The everyday mistakes, the many disasters that occurred in these halls, on the world stage and the marginal seat campaign trail, where he had no equal as a campaigner, organiser and reader of people. Even now you can open one of Barry's books at random and read out a tale about Gough or Neville or Bob or Paul that makes you laugh out loud. Barry had an exceptional recall of Whitlam witticisms, an anecdoctorate some called it. He could do a first-rate impression of the great man. But he was never afraid to be the punchline of his own jokes either. As you would know, he was extremely proud of his background in menswear, the insights and experience that he gained from starting and running a small business. In fact, when he started his first menswear shop in Gordon in 1959, a friend of Barry's suggested he visit another shop on the Pacific Highway that specialised in artistic bric-a-brac to add some character to the interior. It just so happened that Barry had known the shop owners for a long time. In his view, they were a respectable, middle-class family, but their 18-year-old son, Brett, was a five-star nutter. Anyway, Barry bought a few pieces, and on his way out, the owner asked him if he was interested in purchasing some of his son's paintings, and he pointed to 5 that he had hanging in the shop. 15 quid each, or all 5 for £60. Barry said, "I don't know much about art, and I wasn't about to be conned by an old codger trying to sell his son's paintings." So he simply replied, "It's kind of you to offer, but no thank you, Mr. Whiteley." No wonder Bob appointed him Minister for the Arts. It was in that role that Barry often hosted advanced screenings of Australian films for MPs, the senators, the senior public servants, to promote our Australian film industry. One night after a screening, he got into the car and his driver said, "The Prime Minister needs to see you immediately." As Barry put it, there are those moments in a minister's life when his past flashes before him and you try and remember the mistakes you've made or the ones you don't think they know. So Barry rang through King's Hall, down the corridor into the lobby of the Prime Minister's office, where the secretary on duty told him that Mr Hawke's been trying to get in touch with him for more than 3 hours. This did nothing to settle Barry's nerves, but he summoned up the courage and knocked on the door, and in his own words, after what seemed an interminable wait, Bob came to the door with a deep frown on his face. He looked at me intently for a minute or so, then said, "Now, who have you got organised for golf in the morning?" In all seriousness, we honour and remember a remarkable man with an extraordinary legacy. He safeguarded some of Australia's most precious national treasures for future generations, from Uluru to Kakadu to the Great Barrier Reef. He championed the security of Israel and stronger ties of friendship between our two nations. And even when Barry's time in public life had ended, even when he became more than one of 400,000 Australians living with dementia, he did not go gentle into that good night. It's in fact when I came to know him best, not from his remarkable 6 columns in The Australian extolling my virtues, a feat never to be repeated, but as an irrepressible and irresistible advocate for a better deal for older Australians. I think we all know all that charisma, all that humour, all that passion, all of that undoubted love for his family, for whom he was very proud and would talk to me at length about. That lifetime of campaigning experience channelled into a cause that is all too often overlooked. We don't have a cure for dementia yet, and we have a long way to go before I think we are doing aged care in this country worthy of the generation who's raised us, taught us and helped build a modern Australia. But when we find the cure, when every older Australian and their family can enjoy a life of greater dignity and security, Barry Cohen will be due a measure of great credit. On behalf of the Labor family, Ray, and your family, I say thank you. Thank you for lending Barry to our cause and to the nation. We're all the better for his contribution to our country. May he rest in peace.
What a fantastic tribute. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Shorten. This next part of the service requires a bit of an introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, King Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes, Yom Tov Hamaves Miyom Hivoldo. Better the day of death than the day of birth. The question here is obvious. When a child is born, its family rejoices. When someone dies, generally people cry. How then does the wisest of all kings, of all men, King Solomon, suggest that better the day of death than the day of birth? Well, going back to Barry, in our last conversation, he told me how much he loved this sport. Now, he dabbled in a couple of different sports in his younger years, some of them quite successfully. I'll give you an example from the cricket season. In the cricket, when the openers come out to bat, there is relatively little cheering from the crowd. As the batsman reaches the various milestones, it is then that the true celebrations begin. A half century gets you an applause, a century, standing ovation, and any further milestones are welcomed with yet greater enthusiasm. And so it is with life, my friends. When a person is born, the joy is one of speculation, really. We don't yet know what will become of the newborn. But when the person passes away, we are then able to take stock and recognize their accomplishments, their innings, this then becomes the true celebration of one's life. The happy song we're about to sing was requested by a special request by Barry's dear wife, Ray, because she knows that Barry would have wanted us to celebrate his life as opposed to just mourning his death. This song is a very joyous, popular Jewish folk song. It's not going to be that easy, but it's a song to celebrate Barry's captain's knock, his superb innings. It also serves as a call to action for the living, to take a leaf out of Barry's book of life, to live our lives to the fullest, and to ensure that when our respective times come, when our innings are over, our lives are also worth celebrating, as Barry's is today. The meaning of this song, it's in Hebrew. The words are, "Come, let us be glad and rejoice. Arise, brethren, with a joyous heart. Arise, brethren, with a joyous heart." And I think this is such a fitting song that you chose, because we can really celebrate Barry's life with this song. Please sing along if you know it. And if you don't know it, feel free to clap along or celebrate in any other way. The song can be found with the Hebrew words in the program book. Hava, Nagila Hava, Nagila Hava, Nagila V'Ismecha. Hava, Nagila Hava, Nagila Hava, Nagila V'Ismecha. Hava, Nedanina, Hava, Nedanina, Hava, Nedanina, V'Ismecha. Hava, Nedanina, Hava, Nedanina, Hava, Nedanina, V'Ismecha. Ruachim, V'lev Sameach, Ruachim, V'lev Sameach, Ruachim, V'lev Sameach, Ruachim, Ruachim, V'lev Sameach. One more time. Hava. Hava, Nagila, Hava, Nagila, Hava, Nagila V'Ismecha. Hava, Nedanina, Hava, Nedanina, Hava, Nedanina V'Ismecha. Hava, Nedanina, Hava, Nedanina, Hava, Nedanina V'Ismecha. Ruachim, Ruachim, V'lev Sameach, Ruachim, V'lev Sameach, Ruachim, V'lev Sameach, Ruachim, V'lev Sameach, Ruachim, Ruachim, V'lev